This week, I bring you a fantastic episode with Jeff Perry. He's a mechanical engineer turned entrepreneur. And in this episode, we'll be talking about his new book, The Intentional Engineer. And I think that's kind of one of the things that, as you will hear throughout the episode, you'll start to see the pattern of how Jeff has been like very intentional from the beginning of his career to helping clients, dozens, hundreds, thousands of people improve their careers. He's worked with students, he's worked with professionals. He has a lot of client and student involvement. I think he's an amazing coach that has brought kind of his engineering knowledge. He is very intentional in his career development, his professional development, and now with this book, I think he's taking everything to the next level. I'm very excited to bring these conversations to you as we begin 2024 with hopefully a little more intentionality. 2023 was probably not the best year for the podcast. There was a lot of ups and downs and family and traveling and moving, and there's just a lot going on. So I'm hopeful in 2024 we're going to launch these podcasts or relaunch this podcast again and become a little more intentional with what we're doing here. And I think this is a great way to start the episode. If you haven't set your 2024 goals, if you're still thinking and wondering what to do with your year, I think this episode will kind of give you some clarity. And I think more importantly, getting the book, getting it in your hands, reading it, downloading the workbook, and applying everything in there is going to be essential and crucial for everything coming in 2024 for you. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the conversation with Jeff. Welcome back to another episode of the Engineer Future Podcast. My name is Duque. I'm here again with Jeff Perry. He's been a previous guest in the show, someone that I've been following along for a long time, and we'll be talking about his most recent book, The Intentional Engineer, which I think is a fantastic title. Just overall, as engineers, we should be more intentional, and I think we'll kind of dive into a little bit more as we go with the episode. But just gonna give us a quick overview of kind of your mindset coming into writing this book, and kind of where did you see this going as you were kind of in the first drafts, in the very initial planning stages of the book. Where do you see this fitting into the engineering profession?
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to share about this idea. So when it comes to writing a book, there's a whole lot of ways to do it. And I, as someone, since I started my practice and doing this work in leadership and career development about 4.5 years ago, I thought for a long time I wanted to write a book. And I probably outlined a book multiple times, and I've been writing articles and blogs and newsletters for years, but I just had never like turned that corner, like, okay, it's time to write the book. But I had a mentoring conversation with one of my mentors, and it was actually sort of multiple that I had, and multiple of them were like, hey, when are you going to write your first book? Have you written your first book yet? And I said, no, not yet. But I had an event that I was planning to go to, an engineering conference that I was going to be speaking at, and they were going to give me an exhibit booth to share some of the work that I do. And I sort of just caught the vision in this conversation with my mentor, like, hey, how cool would that be to write a book and have it there on the table when I'm there meeting with a bunch of engineers? And there's just a lot of energy behind that. And so I finally committed to that process. You know what? I'm going to make it happen. And so that was my target date. And I created a plan to work backwards from there to make it happen. And so the good thing about having the fact that I've been writing for years and is that I had a lot of content that I could work with and on different topics and things. And, you know, obviously I still need to put that together into a cohesive book, but it was a very fast process for me comparatively, and it worked out well for me. So it was about 3 months from idea and commitment to having a book in my hand, which was pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I think that one of the challenges that you probably were facing at the beginning is just kind of that imposter syndrome that I think we have touched on previous episodes into, like, hey, I have never written a book. Where do I even start? Who will be the ideal reader? Obviously, you have a lot going on with the coaching and the newsletter and everything, so you kind of know where your ideal reader is. But how did you kind of, those initial stages, maybe that procrastination was like, hey, who's going to read a book about this topic? How did you
Oh,
kind of overcome those initial challenges when you were preparing for it?
oh, totally. Who's going to read it? Why would anyone listen to me and pay a few bucks to buy a book when there's so many other books out there that they could potentially read? But here's the thing about imposter syndrome, right? Is that imposter syndrome means that there are usually other people who believe in you, but
Mhm.
you don't believe in you, and you're believing yourself instead of other people in that case, right? So that's why those mentoring conversations were so critical for me, is because I wasn't believing in myself that I had anything worthy to say to put into a book until I was able to finally latch on to that energy from them to say, yeah, like you should do this. I believe in, like, they believed in me for a second. And then I started to believe them instead of believe me and my doubts and that imposter syndrome. Right. And so why do we believe ourselves and those doubts? There's all sorts of reasons behind that. But sometimes we just need those other people to help us through some of that. But the cool thing is, and I could look back on, hey, look at all the things that I have been writing and the coaching and the stories and all the things around the work that I'm doing that absolutely has been transformational and has helped dozens and hundreds of people, thousands of people with my writing and podcasts and other things. And so why wouldn't I want to do that with a book as well, and be able to believe in myself that I could do it? And so um, finally, just that decision, instead of just having this as an idea that I would write a book, but really deciding and committing to it at a much higher level, and then creating the plan of action and going and attacking it from that standpoint. So there's just a lot of energy behind it, and I finally put that into it and committed, and things fell into place. I found other mentors on the book writing and the publishing process, and I found a great editor and all these things, because and I think some of those things fell into place because I was finally in the place
Mhm.
where I was committing to that process and I was able to make it happen.
Yeah, that's great. Before we jump kind of in the book, I'm just kind of curious to hear kind of your process of kind of writing the first draft, finding is the editor, the someone to proofread it, someone to publish it. Like for someone that is just starting out, like let's say I wanted to write a book in the next
Mm-hmm.
2 years, and I'm sure there's a lot of engineers that will like to do that in the future. So I think this will be interesting. What was your kind of process from like beginning? Hey, I'm sitting here, I'm gonna write the introduction to this book to have the physical book on my hands.
Yeah, perfect. So I found, and I've been following a guy who's a book coach and had a how to publish your book workbook. So I picked that up and I started connecting with this guy, and he had a weekly kind of mastermind sessions that I started attending. And that workbook, the cool thing about that is, like, it's like publish your book in 90 days. And
Mhm.
so there was a path and a process, and the 90 days was about the timeline I was working on. And so this was perfect. I dove into that. I really understood what that plan was, and I started connecting with someone who knew what they were doing. Interestingly enough, his wife is an editor, and so she became my editor. My wife was actually my first editor. She was the
Mhm.
first person to read through that first. They call it a vomit draft when you just sort of get everything out. But yeah, so I sort of gave myself a month to outline, for the most part, what this was going to look like, start filling that in, create the structure around that. And that meant I had to write the bulk of a couple chapters a week for the most part. And so I blocked out some time every day to get into writing, and tried to do everything I could to eliminate distractions and just sit in that space. And then my wife went through it for about a week, and then we started working with the editor, and there was a lot of back and forth there, and we went through two large revisions, and she was also a pro on all the things that it takes to get it published, and go through what is called typesetting, where you lay out the pages and everything for the book and how it's going to be printed and everything, and she did a great job. So it's just kind of moving through that process. She told me how long she thought it would take from her side, so I had some deadlines, and every time I just needed to keep pushing forward and meeting those deadlines and the different um, milestones along the way, so I could reach the end goal, and we were able to get there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, this is exciting. I think something physical that you can feel that you've worked on probably for so hard is a lot more rewarding than a lot of the digital stuff that you probably have put out there, and probably takes a lot more work.
Mhm.
Let's dive a little bit into book. Like where did the thesis or the intentional engineer title come from?
Yeah, so I recognize that this word intentional, right, was just so important to some of the work that I do with the clients that I was doing. I found myself talking about intentionality and the people who they found themselves at some sort of crossroads in their life and their career that something needed to change, and they were at a point where they decided, and that word decision is critical, that to be intentional is a choice. They decided that they wanted to go get clarity on where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do, and then go make that a reality. So they wanted to be more intentional instead of just opportunistic around their life and their career, right? And so intentionality and being intentional was already a theme for a lot of the work that I did. And the other thing about the word intentional is that it's a theme that I need all the time, right? So you talk to any author or any coach or someone, like a lot of the things that they are working to help other people on, they work on themselves, right? So a lot of the principles that I put in the book were principles that I needed. It's a book that I needed to write for me. Um, and plenty of the principles that I'm still working on all the time and being intentional. I still wonder about what's next for me, and doubt about going to make that happen, and then need to take those actions to get there. I mean, writing the book included, was part of that process. But all of us, like, so often we get in the state of just saying, okay, what's the thing that's right in front of me? I'll just take that because it seems easy. Engineers are very employable, so we can sometimes get stuck into just taking what's given to us instead of saying, this is what I want to go do, to try, and even more importantly, to become as a person, as a professional, and move through that process and do that with intention, to make that decision that you're going to be intentional about your life instead of just let your life come to you, let your life happen to you. That's a big decision, but it's an important one that I want every single engineer to be able to make, because if you can do that, you're going to reach a higher potential. You're going to have a higher impact,
Mhm.
and it's going to be better for you. You're going to be more engaged and satisfied in your work and in your whole life in general. And you're going to, it's best for the employers and things too, when they can support that and when they can help engineers dig into their best selves and find roles that are best suited for them. It's a win-win situation because there's going to be more innovation and productivity and collaboration and everything else that uh, companies and organizations need out of their engineers and technical professionals. And so it's just a great opportunity for everyone, because engineers are solving some of the biggest problems in the world, and making things that keep people safe. And so we have a huge responsibility to do that well. And we're best to be able to do that when we are intentional about what we want to do and how we want to create our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's as I kind of was looking over the book before our meeting or before this conversation, I started to realize that your layout, it's there's like different layers of intentionality. At least that's how I'm looking at it. So there's your personal intentionality, like make sure you are doing the right things for yourself, or make sure you have mental clarity, make sure you're focused at work. There is that job intentionality, like make sure you are being intentional how you collaborate with teammates, how you perform your engineering work. There's some like mindset related stuff there that we can touch on in a little bit. And then there's maybe the bigger one, which is the career life intentionality. Like how are you seeing the bigger picture? How those kind of daily steps and different layers, starting from your personal intentionality, transform you to become a better engineer overall. More than just a piece in the puzzle at work, just a bigger piece in society. How your designs empowering others, how you are making sure everyone is safe. Because as engineers, that's kind of our main goal. Make sure um, the welfare of society, make sure everyone is safe, and make sure our design is ethical and has all the standards that are required. So describe to me, was that kind of your point of view as you were drafting this? Just the way I see it, there's different layers kind of built on each other to really give you a kind of what you say, a very intentional path to look at yourself. What are you doing right now? How can this transform your career in 5, 10 years, and going from there?
Absolutely, because all the choices that I make and that you make and any one of us makes,
Mhm.
it impacts us individually, but it impacts so many other people and situations and society as you're talking about. So absolutely. So if I'm more intentional, I'm going to be more satisfied and enjoy the different pieces of my life and career more often. But that impact will then impact who I'm working with, my team, my family, right, and the people I interact with at home, my friends, and everything. And then certainly, like we were talking about, the impact of work, the work that engineers do impact society at large. Whether we're talking about, I mean, you design bridges, that's critical. Like, you know, we can't be having bridges that fall down,
Mhm.
right? So the safety of the people who are going to be utilizing the things that you design and work on. Other engineers and technology professionals are utilizing technology and creating technology that people are going to use every day, all day, whether that's something on your phone or your computer, something like that. Like, what you do impacts others' lives. And are you going to do that work in a way that's certainly ethical, but where you're thinking about the responsibility you have to create great things that impact the world for good? That it's a choice that we all get to make. And so, uh, yeah, the work that we do matters, and also just the people that we are and the ripple effects of the influence we can have on humans
Mhm.
with the way that we interact with them, and the kind of life that we live, the example we can set for people that we mentor, or certainly our children and others that we influence, or even just like volunteer stuff, if you do stuff in the community or other things. Uh, it it all ripples out from who we are and the people that we become and the choices that we make. And so absolutely, it's asking ourselves these questions: who do we want to become? What kind of impact do we want to make? What do we want to be when we grow up? And what are the ways that we want to impact our lives, our family, our workplace, the community, society as a whole? What kind of imprint are we going to make? And to some degree, like, you can say, like, we matter a whole lot. To some degree, like, so there's billions of people on the earth, maybe we're kind of insignificant. But we get to decide the kind of life that we want to live, and when we choose to do that, then we can have a more positive impact.
Absolutely, I think that's great. Kind of mantra to have, just the way you see. And I think sometimes engineers could get too into that intentional, and maybe they're too rigid into everything they're doing. But there is a certain beauty to like managing kind of the expectations and make sure you're not going overboard with it, which I'm sure you touched maybe a little bit on the book. Something I'm curious, and I know we have talked about this before, is just the aspect of how we start the day. Like, what are the intentional things we're doing every day? Like, I know you like to journal, you like to maybe have some quiet time in the morning. How do those things that you maybe do early in the day transform your day overall? Like, what are just some like little things that you like to do, maybe like 5 minutes in the morning, that is going to bring a big impact during the day?
Yeah. So morning routines are great, and I'm a big fan of them, but also giving yourself a little bit of grace when it doesn't turn out
Mhm.
quite right. I mean, I've got four little kids, and I would love to have a perfectly wonderful morning routine, but quite frankly, sometimes kids are keeping me up in the middle of the night, and so I sleep until my kids wake me up in the morning, and so my morning routine isn't quite as quiet and nice as I would like it to be. So give yourself a little bit of grace, right? But some things that I really try and do, I try and spend some time in spiritual practice, so in scripture and prayer and meditation, and then I try and spend some time journaling, kind of thinking about what do I want this day to look like, and I do some gratitude, a few things I'm grateful for. I write down a few affirmations, and I write down like what would make today great, and just doing that little bit that just takes a couple minutes, can really get me to start thinking about what's the kind of day that I want to create and have that focus on being intentional about the day that's ahead of me. And sometimes I do that before my kids wake up, and sometimes I have to do that after I make breakfast and get them off to school, and I can get into the rest of my day. But I do everything I can to make that happen at some point. And even if it's late, that's better late than never to still create the rest of the day when I can.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to think about it. Again, I have three kids at home, so most mornings are again not as quiet as I would like. Sometimes at least one child wakes up in the middle of the night, maybe multiple. You're running
Hmm.
around, you're awake maybe half the night, and then you just need to sleep to get some rest for the day. But I think that's kind of part of that intentional you're talking about. Like some days, like knowing, hey, I don't have an hour for myself this morning. What's something I can do in 5 minutes before I sit on my desk and start working? I'm gonna write something I'm grateful for today. I'm grateful I spent time with my children this morning with my family, move on and on with the day. But the intentional part of it is taking a step back, knowing that hey, this was not my ideal choice. I'm gonna make the most out of it, being grateful for something. I have a family, I have a roof, I have work that I need to be doing, and moving on with that. The unintentional part of it will be just hey, the day is horrible. I'm just gonna call it quits for the rest of the day and not doing
Hmm.
that. Let's talk about just in that line on mindsets. There is something here that says mindsets fuel behavior, behavior fuels results. You want to expand a little bit on that? I was kind of curious on that section of the book, and I think it's an important one um, because sometimes we struggle with that mindsets part and thinking we're not enough, and a lot of these comes from inside of us rather than people telling us and some exterior um, behavior impact.
Absolutely. So mindsets are, just to define them a little bit, it's kind of the lens through which we see the world. Like, information comes in. Another way to think about it is sort of our internal operating system, right? So data information comes in through our eyes, our ears, all of our senses, right? Or situations we find ourselves in, but it moves through our mindsets, and then we interpret that, and then we decide what we're going to do with that. So whether that's a conversation you're having, a challenge, or an opportunity that you face at work, or some decision that you're trying to make, it's all filtered and influenced by our mindsets. And so we can think about like uh, and so one of the most common mindsets that, and I talk about it in the book, is the growth mindset that was popularized by the work of Carol Dweck in her book Mindset: The Psychology of Success. Um, and so a growth mindset suggests that hey, we can grow and develop and change over time in skills and attributes and abilities, instead of just thinking I'm fixed. That's the other side, is having a fixed mindset. I'm fixed, I can't change. Who I am now is who I'm always going to be. Why try to change anything about me? If there's something that you're unhappy with, or if there's a skill you want to develop, or something that's hard for you, when you're in a fixed mindset, you don't believe that you can change. You also usually don't believe that other people can change, right? And so just use that as an example, right? When we're thinking about leveling up, or improving or changing something in your career, if you have a fixed mindset, how would that influence your behavior? And when we're talking about mindsets fuel behavior, well, you're not going to take on challenges that look to be difficult, right? You're gonna kind of play it safe so that you avoid failure as much as possible. You're probably not going to be having conversations with your leaders about uh, making more money. You're not going to want to negotiate, because what if they say no? Like, they're just going to pay me what I'm worth, or anything like that. Um, you're just sort of going to be opportunistic and take what people give you, instead of saying, I want to try something new. I want to learn a new skill or something like that, right? So that mindset influences your behavior. And in that case, with a fixed mindset, is going to hold you back from a ton of growth opportunity and unlocking some of your potential that you absolutely have, but you're the one choosing to hold yourself back in that situation. And contrast that with having a growth mindset, with hey, you're going to take on those challenges, you're going to look for new opportunities inside or outside your organization, maybe some things on the side, an impact that you want to have, and ways you want to grow. If you do fail, or something screws up, you're going to look at that as a learning opportunity rather than indicative that you are a failure. right? You're going to say, what can I learn from this? How can I do this better next time? You're going to put in processes and other structures and get some help so that the next time you're going to do that much better, right? And so that's going to fuel your behavior in a much more positive way. And that's just one mindset ideal. There are a bunch of others, but we need to be aware of where our mindset currently sits. And there's some suggestions in the book on how to do that. You can do some reflection, say, hey, what's kind of my default mode in some of these things? And then intentionally decide this is what I want to change. And I outline a process to be able to do that in the book as well, where we can essentially fight back and collect data that contrasts against those negative limiting beliefs and mindsets that we're holding on to, so that we diminish the power of those limiting beliefs and start believing the more empowering truths that are going to help us become who we want to become. Like, for example, we were talking about imposter syndrome earlier. My mindset, my belief at the time for a long time was that I didn't have anything to say. Well, that influenced my behavior and held me back from ever writing a book in the past. When that switched, when I made that decision that I was going to believe that, and my mindset changed, that influenced my behavior, and I was able to write the book. Um, that's just one really simple example. But I see huge changes in people in the work that I do, where a lot of people come to me like, hey, I want to, they get focused more on the outcome they're looking for. But really, when we can go back to the foundational work that needs to be done with how they're thinking about everything, we can focus on transforming them and how they think and what they believe, then the outcomes are going to come. But sometimes we focus too much on the outcome and less on the process of becoming and changing ourselves. But when we can focus on that first, the outcomes and the results are going to be inevitable in the short term and the long term, because we are the people that are going to make that happen. And so that's why I'm a huge believer that mindsets are so foundational and influence uh, the actions that we take, which then lead to the results that we're going to get to. So let's focus on the internal change instead of so much on the external change that we're looking for.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, as you explain it, it's all really simple. Doesn't mean that it's easy. That
Right.
is just easy to like change your mindset, but it's simple. It's just, hey, what are the things that I need to do? Um, as just a maybe unrelated example, but for the longest time, I was playing tennis every single day. I was practicing 3 4 hours. So my mindset and my belief is like, I'm a tennis player. I'm an athlete. I work out every day, regardless if I'm tired, if I'm sleepy. This is what I do. This is who I am. Then college came, family came, and then I had a maybe 3 year stretch where I didn't touch a tennis racket, or I didn't go for a run or weights or anything, because my
Yeah.
mindset shift. I had other priorities. I was maybe my mindset was like, I need to be a better student. I need to be better at work. And the athlete and tennis player kind of mindset went away. And if you play sports and stop for a while, you start seeing some weight gain, and that doesn't feel good for multiple reasons, but just health. Like, I want to be healthy for my family. I want to be present,
Hmm.
play with my children, and everything. So again, my mindset had to shift again. Say, no, I am someone that gets up in the morning. Workout is important to me. I'm going to tackle it first thing in the morning. um, and again, all of that comes internally. It's not easy, but it's very simple to have that mindset shift. Applying it, it's a different thing, a different story. It takes a lot of effort, takes some conviction to actually do that. But I think it's important to for people to realize that that intentionality starts with yourself. You can have accountability from the outside, but if you don't make that internal change, if you don't become intentional in everything you do, I think there's going to be maybe a rougher path moving forward. For anyone that is kind of curious about the book, just kind of give us a kind of your elevator pitch on how you will sell this book. Who is it for? Who should definitely read it? And just tell us where can people find it.
Yeah. So it's called The Intentional Engineer, obviously, but the subtitle is A Guide to a Purpose-Driven Life and Career for Engineers and Technical Professionals. So this is for anyone in the engineering and technical realm, students, early career, even up to senior leaders. I talked to a bunch of people who have read it and really enjoyed it. If you are recognizing that there's something that you want to change in yourself and the outcomes about your life and career, this book is for you. And I've had multiple people, or even outside of engineering, who have said like this is really about building an intentional life, not just your career, because a career is just one piece of your life. So I really just hope that we can get it into more people's hands. Right now, I've got the Kindle and the paperback version. I'm working on a plan to create an audio version as well, that people can get on Audible. But I hope that people read it, but more importantly, apply it, and the principles inside of there. And so, if you want to go find more information, go to theintentionalengineer.com. But then also, in addition to the book, I created a companion workbook that corresponds with the book. You can get a free digital version at theintentionalengineer.com/workbook. Or you can buy the paperback version if you want a printed version on Amazon for that as well. But because I know, like, the way that I read books, sometimes I just read them to get through it, but then I don't sit there and take the time to process and do the activities that are suggested in the book. And that's what the workbook is primed and perfect for. It gives you space to write, the different pieces that you need to work on, the questions that is being asking, and reflect on the activities that you're going through to give you that space to do that. And you can either print those out if you get the PDF version, or type them out in your computer, or again, write them out if you want to do that. So however that works for you, but I really wanted to create this as a useful, action-oriented resource, and not just say, hey, these are ideas, but go do something with that. So, and I hope that's true with our conversation today. So I want you to do something with it. Go grab the book, theintentionalengineer.com, or you can find it on Amazon, and let me know how it changes anything for you. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm again excited. I read a little bit of the book kind of over the weekend and yesterday as I kind of get familiar with the book. But I think the main global kind of topic of just being more intentional. I think that's kind of what I'm getting away from this conversation is, and it's not only being intentional for the sake of being intentional in everything you do, but just having those goals. And again, we're recording this at the end of 2023, going into 2024. Like, how are you going to become intentional in 2024 to achieve those goals? Like, hey, get the book, start reading it, apply it. As if you're an engineer, there's a lot of different things that obviously we're not taught in school in terms of our professional development, our like personal development. And I think this book will give you kind of that guide into, hey, this is where you are maybe right now. This is where you're starting. Here are some of the simple steps. And again, along with the workbook, there's a lot of information that you can take from there, apply it, different mindsets that you can use, different intentionality you can go. When I could talk about the personal, the work, the career, and following that path. I think that's a way that every engineer can start 2024 on the right path. And I'm excited for people to listen to it, for people to read it, get them in their hands. We'll link everything in the show notes below. But yeah, thank you so much for coming to the show. I appreciate all the knowledge. We've been connected for, I think, 2-3 years now. It seems like hasn't been that long, but it's been great to get to know this process. I was kind of early on in the list, and you were kind of sharing all the wins. And I think that was so cool just to kind of get a behind the scenes of how the book was made and how kind of your intentional path to becoming a published author came to be. So I really appreciate all of that. And I really wish everyone gets to get the book and enjoy it. And like you said, more importantly, apply it and become intentional.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's so great to know you, and I love the work that you're doing. So absolutely, let's stay connected. And if there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. If you really enjoyed this episode of the Engineering Future Podcast, you're going to love the content we have over our website at luisfelipeduque.com. You can find the link in the description of this episode, as well as the show notes at luisfelipeduque.com/podcast. Every episode comes packed with a lot of links, a lot of information. So you can find all the show notes and all the information related to this episode over at luisfelipeduque.com/podcast. Thank you so much for coming back to this episode. Thank you, Jack Winters, for the music. And as always, let's continue engineering our future.